It's time to join Montana's very own and your voice for agriculture, Talkin' Ag Lane Nordland, for today's Lanecast.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Lanecast Ag Podcast. Some big news out of Washington, D.C. surrounding the waters of the U.S. Here's EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin making a big announcement today.
It was a pledge that these senators asked me to make to them and to their constituents that if confirmed, as soon as I get into office, I would do everything in my power to make sure that we are fixing WOTUS once and for all, that we are pursuing a definition that is simple, that is durable, and it will withstand the test of time. Our goal in going through this process is not to be an activist in going through a procedure. This is to simply follow the rule of law, to follow the Constitution, to listen to the stakeholders, and to make the right decision for the American people. We are not looking for this to be a ping pong anymore. What we're looking for is to simply follow the guidance from Sackett.
Again, that announcement with a rule change for the waters of the U.S. is welcome news to farmers and ranchers who for quite some time have been battling this rule, saying it is a government overreach. And joining us here today to explain more about what this new rule may mean and the process of getting up to the years of that it took to get to today's announcement. Joining us here today is Mary Thomas Hart, Chief Counsel with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Mary Thomas, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hi, Lane. Good to see you.
Well, you and I have at length discussed waters of the U.S. in the past. We've discussed Supreme Court rulings such as Sackett v. EPA. We've discussed the lack of movement in the Biden administration to address Supreme Court rulings. Today's news coming out, welcome news to farmers and ranchers who have opposed what became waters of the U.S. What is the feeling as you know that your members are excited to hear this news, and how do we get to this point here today?
I would say the feeling in the room or the feeling across the country should be optimistic and hopeful. We were really excited in 2023 when we got a unanimous Supreme Court decision in Sackett versus EPA. That decision overturned the significant nexus standard. It established a new, much more narrow standard for which features can be considered waters of the U.S. And that standard is wetlands with a continuous surface connection to relatively permanent waters, which seems like a pretty easy standard to implement. Relative permanence seems like relative permanence, but we saw the Biden administration in form apply the Sackett standard. They amended the Biden administration's WOTUS definition to conform to the verbiage of the Sackett decision. But then we saw some pretty aggressive implementation of WOTUS across the country, increased permitting, increased enforcement actions through the end of the Biden administration. So Administrator Zeldin's announcement earlier this week, I think is a welcome announcement for farmers, ranchers, and other landowners across the country. And I think a signal that this EPA is planning to actually, in both form and function, conform to the Sackett decision.
Now, a part of this too will be the rulemaking process. What do we expect to see this new rule to truly look like? And how can farmers and ranchers play a role in the rulemaking process to possibly support it or oppose it? If they oppose it, they can oppose it too. What is that rulemaking process like?
Of course, yeah, and I think thank you for asking about the engagement process, because it's so important not only for trade associations to engage on behalf of producers, but to have producers and landowners engaging directly. So we actually saw two announcements from EPA related to WOTUS. The first was the issuance of a joint guidance document together with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. EPA and the Army Corps kind of jointly manage the WOTUS definition and apply the WOTUS definition in its permitting programs. So we saw, I think, a really helpful guidance document that sets a definition for the term continuous surface connection. In addition to that guidance document, EPA issued a Federal Register notice requesting kind of general input for, what other things need to be defined, where do we need to create additional clarity for landowners and other regulated stakeholders across the country. That has an open comment period for either 30 or 60 days. So NCBA will submit input. We encourage producers to submit input. EPA will also be hosting a few listening sessions where stakeholders will have the opportunity to listen in and participate by providing comment.
Now, mainstream media already, Mary Thomas is their headlines are Trump administration rolls back Clean Water Act provisions, takes away protections for the public. From the cattlemen's perspective of things, how important is it to highlight just your view of how this was a government overreach in the role that cattlemen and women play in keeping our landscapes and our waters healthy?
I think, there's certainly some level of rollback, right? But I think it's so important to not focus on the number of water bodies that are or aren't regulated, but focus on the impact to overall national water quality, right? And so when you narrow in the number of features that are regulated, you mandate that EPA focus on the water features that actually matter, right? When we're thinking about the implementation and the value of the Clean Water Act, it's protecting our nation's water resource. It's looking at downstream water quality and looking at the features that truly impact water quality and making sure that EPA's limited resources, both personnel and financial, are directed at the water features that need the most protection. So when I think about a narrow WOTUS definition, it's not limiting or reducing the nation's water quality. It's focusing EPA's resources on the water features that need the most assistance and need the most protection. Cattle producers and other landowners across the country, I think at least, are selfishly interested in maintaining a safe water supply, right? Ranchers live where they graze cattle for the most part. Ranchers are drinking that water. Cattle are drinking that water. We're part of communities that are drinking that water. It's in our best interest to maintain a safe water supply. And so, putting states in the driver's seat to effectively manage the water features in their states and putting landowners in the driver's seat to effectively manage those water features, I think is going to be much more effective in the long term than leaving it to the federal government.
Now, you have spent, all your time at NCBA. This has been an issue. Waters of the U.S. has been front and center. It's been there since I started in farm broadcasting. What does it feel like to know that you have advocated on behalf of the nation's cattle producers to be their voice, to put out public opinions, to oppose issues like Waters of the U.S., and to see it to come back into a more common sense line of thinking?
Well, one of my probably most quoted stats, but one of my least favorite stats, is that if you've been managing land or operating a ranch or a farm from the time that the Clean Water Act was first signed into law in 1972, you have dealt with now 14 different regulatory iterations of a WOTUS definition. That's untenable if you're trying to manage a business, plan future land management actions, plan how to pass your ranch on to the next generation. How we manage our land impacts all of those decisions. And so it's been truly the honor of my career to spend the last 8 years working on WOTUS. And I hope that one day before I retire, we have an answer to this question. We have some finality on this question, and we can end the regulatory whiplash once and for all.
And I hope you don't think I was trying to say you've been in practice and following this issue since the 70s. I was thinking the Obama-Biden administration rules. So, so I just want to clarify that for you and our audience.
But many an environmental attorney have come before me, have had full careers and retired without a final solution for WOTUS. So I hope that I don't end up in that camp, but I guess we'll see. Hopefully the next 4 years work really well for producers, that we have a good lineup both at the EPA and in the court system, and we can get some final solid concrete answers and a lasting WOTUS definition.
Well, I definitely have a few more gray hairs from when I first started reporting on WOTUS when I kicked off my career 10 years ago. But
I have
uh,
a few gray hairs too, but we don't have to talk about those.
but Mary Thomas, at the end of the day, what is your message to farmers and ranchers out across the countryside about this rule? I know you did say how important it is to have their voices heard in the rulemaking process, but any key things you want folks to walk away with here today, or maybe resources that they could find to better educate themselves on key issues like this and others that impact livestock production?
Of course. Yeah. You can follow NCBA and not just our WOTUS work, but all of our policy work at ncba.org. Beef USA on social media. We'll be trying our best to keep you updated there. But certainly, I think NCBA membership is the best way to kind of keep in touch and know what's going on in DC on a day-to-day basis. When we're talking about all of the issues that impact the cattle industry, we'll be providing information on how you can participate in upcoming listening sessions and potential rulemakings as it relates to WOTUS and a whole host of other policy issues.
Well, again, a lot of news coming out, and again, a revision of those WOTUS rules and the rulemaking process coming your way here sooner than later for those of us here in the countryside. But Mary Thomas Hart, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Lane.
With that, friends, thanks for joining us for this quick conversation about waters of the U.S. here on the Lanecast Ag Podcast. I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lanecast with Talkin' Ag, Lane Nordlund. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lanecast on your Apple or Android devices. We look forward to joining you next time on the Lanecast.